Good morning, everybody. We're really pleased to be with you this frosty morning to be talking with Councillor Shantanu Rajawat about the business budget. Shantanu, would you like to turn your camera back on? And Alan also. We've got a few people in the background who are here on behalf of the council. Should anybody ask a tricky question that Councillor Rajawat can't answer, but I'm sure he's got everything covered. Councillor Rajawat,
we all have confidence.
Especially, yes, absolutely. This is like old times, because during the pandemic we used to do regular task force, so it's lovely to be back. Councillor Rajawat, would you like to start your presentation about the business budget?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sally and Alan, and thank you once again to the Chamber. It does feel like old times, doesn't it? Yeah. Sitting, talking about all things business. So it's great to be back here, and I'm really grateful to the Chamber for all their support in arranging this and getting it online. You put a lot of pressure on me there, Sally. Everything under control. Not so sure. You may get a sense of that as we go through the presentation. But you're right. I've got members of my team here should we need any further support. So first challenge is to get the slides up. Rupert, if you wouldn't mind. As if by magic, they come up. Great. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Councillor Shantanu Rajawat. I'm the leader of the London Borough of Hounslow, but I also have responsibility for finance and corporate services. So that covers everything from the money through to governance into support for business. And I've always said, and I've been very clear, I've held this portfolio for a number of years, that Hounslow is very pro-business, and we want to do all we can within the confines that we have to support businesses. Now, in past years, I've come here and given you rather a dull presentation on what the council budget looks like, but actually what I thought would be more useful in the current climate is to talk to you a little bit around some of those challenges, what the council is facing. Some of those you may well feel familiar with in your circumstances as well, and then also talk about some of the support being offered for business and some of the stuff that's coming forward as well. So I hope you find it useful as we go through it. And very happy to take questions. I want to try and canter through this fairly quickly, so we've got as much time for questions as possible. Hopefully, I don't regret that. Obviously, Alan will ask lots of tricky questions. I know he always does. So yeah. So in terms of the finance update, the challenges, and it is starting with challenges. Generally speaking, those of you that have been here before will know that I say your budget basically runs from February to February. So you set your budget every February, and normally it's the end of February, and the first day of March you sort of start planning for the next year. Obviously, last year we had an election that got in the way. We were very lucky. We were able to form the administration, and I was appointed leader, and we started that process. And those of you that have been here before will know that we don't hide behind the fact that there are challenges that exist within the organisation. We know we've got a ageing population that quite rightly deserves services, but that does cost us more. Services for children and young people and those with special educational needs is also costing more and more. So those were challenges that we were quite comfortable sort of dealing with. We understood them, we'd got under the skin of them, and we're working to try and mitigate against them, as well as the fallover from COVID. Unfortunately, as can be imagined, 44 days of the Liz Truss government unfortunately changed the world completely. So whilst we had a plan, we had mitigations in place sort of by the middle of last year. Following that 44 days, we had to reassess everything and pretty much do an entire budget process in the space of 6 months, and that's very, very challenging. And I've been very clear with my members and members of the council more generally. This is about having choices and options around how we address it, but we need to be really clear about the scale of the challenge going forward. So I've talked a little bit about demand management. I've talked a little bit about instability, and we have to factor in this, and this will be familiar to many of you, higher interest rates, so the affordability on some of our big infrastructure plans. Public finances are strained post-COVID. Prime Minister stood up and has said that many times. That is playing out locally. And then lack of clarity over resources, in particular on transition to net zero carbon emissions. That's a key area. Obviously, key commitments coming out of COP27, I think it was, that we need to deal with, and we'd like a little bit of clarity, because we have declared a climate emergency. We do have an action plan, and we are committed to being net zero by 2030. Then again, very familiar to you, the impact of inflation, and it's at record high levels at the moment. On top of that, whilst I don't begrudge it, the pay award for staff was higher than we'd actually budgeted for originally in our initial plans. Again, I don't begrudge that. I think our staff have done a fantastic job over COVID, and continue to do a fantastic job and should be paid for that. But obviously, that does sit on the bottom line that we need to kind of deal with. And then global economic crisis. The war in Ukraine is clearly having an impact, but also more locally energy issues and the price of energy, alongside a more broader cost of living crisis that is hitting both households, but also the council as well. So how does that play out into the numbers? Next slide, please, Rupa. So what I haven't shown you is what the slides looked like before the Truss government. This is post-Truss government, and I want to take you to the gap that exists at the bottom of this slide, working its way across. Now, those are very, very, very big numbers, and I won't hide behind that. What you'll see is we've been very clear with members around what would happen if we did absolutely nothing, if we didn't address some of these numbers, some of those demand pressures, inflation head on, and try and tackle it with efficiencies, working wisely, innovating, and doing things differently. So the do nothing gap is even larger, but even then, a £23.9 million gap for 1 year is pretty much what I had to deal with over the 4 years of the last administration, maybe give or take a little bit. So we're dealing with really large numbers that we had to deal with. And if we don't do anything, then by the end of the 4-year term, you're looking at a big problem, and that would really cause sleepless nights. And I have to say at this point, just to reassure those on this call, a number of colleague councils have recently declared bankruptcy. Hounslow is nowhere near that. We've always been good at managing the money, understanding the challenge, and really addressing it full on. So I'm confident that we will deal with that. And in fact, the immediate problem for this year, I think we're pretty much there. The budget papers will be released very shortly, so you'll see how we've done that, and that gives us that steady footing to then deal with future pressures as they come up as well. But I'm not going to hide behind nice words and say that it's all fine. Yes, we know what we're doing. We've done this before, and we've got a track record of dealing with financial pressures. We dealt with austerity and COVID really, really well. So we will deal with this and we'll get through it. And we're nowhere near being bankrupt either. So we are a stable authority. So options for closing the gap. Next slide, if you would. So this is what some of that work looks like. I know it's a number of tiles, but within that, there is a lot of work. So those top set of tiles are reviews internally that officers are taking alongside my colleagues on the cabinet. How can we change things? How can we drive efficiencies within the organisation? Some of that income generation opportunities that we have, and then what can we do in terms of permanent things that we can stop doing safely, so that we can look at core services, because we are absolutely committed to providing our core services that our residents value. Then there's further reviews around inflation, budget pressure management, and treasury management, which would either drive efficiencies or drive income into the organisation. And then other areas, obviously council tax there stands out. That's one way of driving income into the organisation. Hounslow has traditionally been very reliant on both business rate take and council tax rate, take. So those are key areas. We look at the financial settlement and what the government give us, and that's now been released. And then how we can use any balances that we have and reserves that we hold within the organisation, noting that reserves are a little bit like a savings account. Once they're gone, you can't guarantee that you'll have that money again. However, you will still have the demand and the pressure that exists there. So I would use reserves very carefully. They're not the solution to all of our problems. So in terms of timetable for the budget, this just sets out sort of what I said earlier, but actually this shows you this 6 months worth of work that my cabinet colleagues and officers and I have sort of gone through from December onwards, from an update to council, the settlement, and then we start looking at options and how that pans out through to setting of the budget on the 28th of February. So very happy to take questions on that. That's a quick canter through that. In terms of some of the business specific headlines announced by government, either in the financial settlement or in other statements made by the Chancellor. There is no London-wide business rate pool. Some of you may remember a couple of years ago, we were able to pool business rates throughout London at the 100% growth of business rates, then redistribute that across London. We did some really good work with that, that we're now feeling the benefits of during COVID. That no pooling arrangement exists for this year. That's been confirmed. So your business rates, some of you may know this, and please forgive me if it sounds like I'm sort of teaching you how to suck eggs here, but for the business rates that you pay, we collect it locally, but it is pooled and redistributed. So in Hounslow, we keep 30%, and then a split goes to the Greater London Authority and then back to central government to distribute across the country. What will be interesting to see, and one of the sort of challenges that we're watching quite closely, is the government often talk about fair funding of local government. So how that redistribution will kind of work, it will be interesting to see how that works out, because I'll be reluctant for too much income going out of London, whilst it may be needed elsewhere. We need to be careful around that. The multipliers were frozen at the 2021 levels, and reliefs exist for retail, hospitality and leisure at 50% discount with a cap of 110,000. And we had business grants, the CAF, and you can see some of the details of what was awarded in terms of discount, 500 businesses, and that breakdown. Worth noting, no additional business grants have been announced for this coming year. So that was 22-23, 23-24. Again, no London-wide business rate pool proposed. The threshold for rateable value by the GLA is being increased for Crossrail business rate supplement, and that's going up from 70,000 to 75,000. And then the multipliers remain frozen, and you can see the detail of what that looks like. The Valuation Office Agency has updated the rateable values of all businesses and other non-domestic properties in Wales. And those future rateable values will take effect from the 1st of April. And for Hounslow, we think that will lead to an average increase of about 12.5% in rateable values. There is information on that on the gov.uk website. So in terms of relief for 23-24, the retail, hospitality and leisure relief to continue, and the level of relief will increase from 50% to 75% from 1st April, again with the same cap. And then supporting small business relief, In the autumn statement, the Chancellor announced that the cap on that the cap bill will increase at £600 per year for businesses losing eligibility for some or all small business rate relief at the 2023 revaluation. And if there are specific questions on that, I'm sure between Sally, Kate, and Rupert, we can sort of answer those. Small business rate relief for properties with a rateable value of less than 15,000, and charitable rate relief for charities and community amateur sports club of up to of 80% by application. And premises that are occupied by non-profit making organisations can claim up to 1% relief, but that is assessed on a rate case-by-case basis. And there's information on the Hounslow website. And again, very happy to answer any questions should there be any. So moving on in terms of some Hounslow specific stuff, when I came into office, the manifesto that I stood on and the Labour Party stood on was being ambitious for Hounslow. That's been translated into our corporate plan that will run the course of this administration, with clear delivery outcomes and a clear financial plan that sits behind it that is monitored. A key part of that that I hope business will understand, us being pro business, is really reimagining what Hounslow's economy looks like. And this is in the context of a decade of austerity followed by COVID, plus a cost of living crisis. So it means we need to really be ambitious about what Hounslow looks like going forward, and how we can really support the diversity, the entrepreneurship that exists within the borough. That's something that I'm really, really proud of. So some of the challenges that you'll be very, very familiar with, you know, the effects of the pandemic are still being felt by you. We know they are. You tell us that it are. And that on top of that, you've got global and UK economic challenges that I sort of mentioned earlier on. However, some good news in that our economy is still growing. Pre-pandemic, we were the second fastest growing economy in London, and we're still growing. There is job growth. You know, Heathrow is a key employer, both directly and indirectly, and there is lots of recruitment going on there. And then we've got other key growth sectors such as TV and media production that continues to expand and locate in the borough. But what that also, in my view, brings is a sense that Hounslow is open, is a place where you can do business very, very successfully, and you've got the right support in place, both from the council, but also the chamber as well, and other key organisations within the borough as well. So what actions have we taken to date? I'm not going to dwell too much on this. You'll be familiar with a lot of this, a mix of grants, rate relief, the Shop Local voucher initiative, which put £1 million back into the Hounslow economy. Visitor economy website launched, a real focus on keeping it local, keeping the Hounslow pound in Hounslow, and really using our procurement process to try and encourage local spend and local procurement as well. We did that during the pandemic. We've got town centre vision documents and master plans for all of our town centres coming forward, an affordable co-working space in the digital dock as well. So a lot of activity there that we have. And then what are we doing going forward? Innovate and Grow is in its fourth iteration. I was really pleased to go to the launch a few weeks ago. That is really targeted support for SMEs and small businesses in the borough to really think about what comes next for them. That, you know, you set yourselves up, you've faced down these challenges. How can we kind of help you with mentoring and growth programs to help you adapt and thrive, as well as look at where you sit within your communities and that wider piece around community wealth building as well. So if you are an SME in the borough, please do look that up. The information is on our website, and I'm sure if you're a member of the chamber, Sally will regularly send out information about this. She's nodding, that's good. There's a lot of targeted work going on there around making sure that your business is viable and contributes to the economy of Hounslow going forward. Really proud also of our creative enterprise zone. That's bringing in lots of exciting stuff going on, from Boston Manor Park, the Creative Mile, a potential new film studio at the Gillette Corner, the Ballymore development, and obviously the digital co-working space. So we are looking at growth sectors and how we can support them. We're very aware that there is work to be done with Heathrow as well in terms of local employment. And I have to say, you know, both the chamber and myself, separately and together, have very good relationships with business and Heathrow in particular, and are able to really push to make sure that Hounslow remains on the map and as part of their thinking for what the future economy looks like in the local area. And then we've got some meanwhile working space in the Treaty Centre. So this is the old Debenhams department store. We've called it the Loft. It's meanwhile space. It's an open plan collection of market stalls selling crafts made by independent makers and products for micro businesses as well. And this really gives small businesses who perhaps wouldn't necessarily make the commitment of buying a shop front that experience of selling in a retail environment on the high street, but in a sort of affordable and supportive environment. So you get a sense of what it's all about, and that's the Arts Centre Hounslow is helping us deliver that, and we've got some GLA funding to support that as well. And then final slide from me, and I promise you then I will shut up, is just more information about Innovate and Grow. As I say, I can't recommend enough. If there are businesses on this call, please do look it up, do consider applying for it. I know, talking to other businesses that have gone through earlier iterations of this, have found it really, really useful. So please do look it up. And that, Sally and Alan, is me done. I hope it was useful, and I'm really, really happy to take questions.
You're on mute, Sally. Are you back with us?
Yeah, I was fighting with my mouse. Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Shantanu. That's really useful. And as I am an actual part of the borough, I'm really pleased. You've given me great confidence that the council is stable, and you know, and you've got a very strong Chamber of Commerce as well. So life is looking rosy, I'm thinking, even though there are huge challenges ahead. If there are questions, could people please put them in the Q&A section? And we do have two questions that have come via the registration. The first one is, what is the plan to significantly increase public access EV charging units across West London? Is there a plan?
So I can't talk about West London, although I actually I can't talk about West London. Talking to my colleague leaders across West London, EV charging infrastructure is a key consideration. Now, for us, it was a key commitment in our manifesto, and therefore a commitment within our corporate plan. And I will be corrected by the officers, but I think our ambition is to install 2,000 public EV chargers of various different descriptions, because it's not just one standard set of equipment. So that could be anything from a adaptation to a oh god, what are they called? streetlight to allow for public charging there to the stations that you see on the side of the road. So we've it's been our strategy has been agreed through cabinet, and we're in the process of sort of doing the procurement process on that. But certainly we are very ambitious to install as many EV chargers of our own with our partners, in the hope that then that also brings in some of the larger players who would bring in some rapid charging stations at petrol stations, because that seems to be the future, as it were, as well. So it's a two-pronged approach. It's what we want to do in partnership with providers, but also then some of the big players coming in and providing the infrastructure there as well. If you want more information on that, please do email me, and I'll be happy to provide you with a strategy. I don't know, Kate, if I've missed anything there.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I've stuck, as you were talking, I've just stuck the strategy link into the chat so people can have a good look at that. I think the only thing I'd add was we are part of the local electric vehicle infrastructure scheme, which was a government scheme which we got money for sub-regionally, levy for pilots. Oh, and oh, I'm echoing crazily. And basically that's going to be a series of kind of officers which will work across the sub-region to unlock that private sector investment. So it will kind of look at large scale commercially sustainable projects to kind of unlock that investment. And our aim as a borough, as you touched on, Lida, was to spread that across the borough to allow that really fair access to the infrastructure across the entire borough, which is is a key commitment in our strategy. Thank you.
Sally, before you go into some of the more general questions that are in
Yeah.
the chat box, can I ask some specific questions about Shantanu's presentation?
Yeah, I'll go for it.
Thank you. Let me look. Don't worry, Shantanu, it's not going to be that probing. We've seen too many. You're going to tell me I'm on mute now, aren't you? No, okay.
Sorry, my building's fire alarm is going off, so I can't actually hear what you're saying.
Please listen for further announcements.
It would be 10:30 on a Wednesday morning, wouldn't it?
It would be, yes.
Is it just a test?
Yes. Okay, thank goodness for that. We're not going to see the leader of the council burnt on a webinar talking about his budget. We've seen too many chancellors come and go last year who did have their fingers burnt, so to speak, by the political process. And I think one of the things that we've all come to learn from that is it's not just a shop local presentation that we all talk about doing to shop safely. I think it's about politics locally and seeing where your council tax and rates are going that are being better balanced. And you know, it's a big thing that you've mentioned that only 30% of the income gets kept by the council and 37% goes on to the GLA. But my question is, how much out of that money that the council put into the GLA does the council get back spent by the Greater London Authority in our area, as we're all really talking about spending locally and look after your Hounslow pound? To add on to that, the biggest local employer that we have in our area is Heathrow Airport. And with the departure of John Holland Kay, what effect do you think that will have on what's going on at the airport?
So, sorry, the fire alarm test completed right at the end of that question. So I got the first part of the question.
John Holland Kay announced his departure from Heathrow Airport at the end of last week. What effect do you think that will have on the airport and local employment in the area?
Yeah, so on the first part of your question, I think we've got a really good relationship with the GLA. We're seen as really working hard to deliver across Hounslow. So we successfully bid for a lot of money. I don't have the exact figures to hand, but I can get that to you outside of the meeting in terms of
a statement of
that,
our fair share would be good. That's enough for us.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I know, you know, I meet with the mayor very regularly. So we have full and frank conversations, and you know, he sees us as a key partner in the borough. So we definitely get our fair share of that. You know, I wish John Honkey well. He's certainly steered the airport through some very, very tough times. So very, very big boots to fill. I think Heathrow, as a local employer, both directly and indirectly, has gone through a journey, becoming a good partner to the local economy. And actually, I think the pandemic really hit home to them the impact, you know, them not being a good partner could have on the local economy. So I've got every confidence that whomever takes over will inherit a culture where they do see local authorities and the local economy as key partners that they need to nurture relationships with. There may be a slightly different approach to things, but that can be expected with a new leader at the helm, if you like. You know, Hounslow is going through that same process with me as a new leader, but certainly I've got confidence that Heathrow is more open than it's ever been, and really willing to engage locally.
From a Chamber's perspective, I must say, going through a cost of living crisis, we certainly feel that we've now got perhaps the best possible person in the job whose history has been in finance. So we're very glad to see you in that post. The follow-on question, I guess, about GLA funding is that we often talk about the benefits of tourism in our borough, and the different sites, the many sites that we've got, and how the majority of tourists land at Heathrow, get on the tube and go straight into the West End and wave goodbye to Hounslow. Given that London is the second biggest tourist attraction in the whole of Europe, after only Paris, that we also know quite well, how can we try and leverage a bit more of GLA funding into our tourism instead of tourism that's spent only in the West End locations?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Alan. And actually, there are two parts to that answer. So I alluded to it in the presentation around really championing what we have within the borough. You know, all the way through from Bedfont Lakes through to Boston Manor, Gunnersbury, Ostley. You know, even though it's not its National Trust, it's still an asset within the borough. So there's that piece around championing what we've got, championing the fact that we are a very diverse borough. One of the great things I saw, and I know I met you at a couple of the events, we ran a Summer of Culture, really showcasing Hounslow's culture and what we're all about. And so we need to do more of that. We need to champion that as sort of destination Hounslow. And I think that's really, really important. I'm absolutely committed to carry on doing that. The second part of that is that leveraging point, and you're absolutely right. And there actually there's a discussion going on that I'm part of across London leaders at the moment around that whole devolution debate and that funding debate, and how you know, the GLA is seen as the sort of conduit by government. You know, they receive the money, and then how you kind of use devolution and think about your local economy sort of in the round. So it's you know, often people talk about tourist tax, for example. That is one lever that you could employ, but there is so much more that you can do around the local economy. So those conversations are really going on, because actually one of the opportunities for levelling up is to make sure that devolution works for London. I don't want to see levelling up at the expense of London. I think if London is successful, and you get levelling up correct in London, you can get levelling up correct throughout the country. It's not one at the expense of the other. It needs to be a true collaboration there. So that there is a lot of conversations going on there, but it's something that's really on my mind and across London with other leaders as well.
I do think that the argument needs to be stressed, and I'm sure you're doing it really well, that levelling up in London itself, so that the boroughs on the leafier suburbs of London get their equal share, not just the West End and central location boroughs. And on that note, you also talked a little bit about VOA and how rateable values are being reset. I see that in the last few months, London house prices have come down. Given that, I wonder if there's a strong possibility that people who go into have their rateable value reassessed might drop into a lower band, given property prices are coming down. And if that is a scenario, then the more businesses that actually ask for that reassessment, perhaps the better they're going to be in their placement of funding that they spend.
Yeah, I mean, you know, any business can apply. From what I understand, the process is very, very slow. So don't expect it to be quick. And you know, I suppose you take the risk that it could go down or it could go up. You know, that's always the risk, but that is something that is available to local businesses should they want to. Unfortunately, it's not something that the council administers. You'd have to go on the Valuation Office Agency website to start that process and get guidance on it, but it is something that exists. I don't know whether any of my officers want to come in and offer any more on that. I can see some stuff potentially could be said. Ben, do you want to say anything on this?
I'm looking at what Ben has put in the chat box.
Oh, is he? He put something in the chat.
He's put, yeah.
I was just about to say, Sally, yeah, we'll put a link in the chat to the appeals.
Oh, that's about GLA rates, 37%.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so I was just going to add, in terms of the revaluation process, the revaluation processes are at a fixed point of time. So the business rates revaluation that's just happening is based on the values as at 1st of April 2021. So that's a right. Fixed point. So if property prices subsequently go up and down, that will only be reflected at the next revaluation, which will be in 3 years' time. Yeah. And it's the same on council tax as well. Council taxes are at a fixed revaluation point. Thank you.
Okay, understand. Thank you very much, Ben. Sally, back over to you. We've got some questions in the chat box. Yeah,
we have, and also the Q&A. We've got a few questions on sport and leisure. What are the opportunities for sport and wellbeing across the borough? Now, I read somewhere that a cafe is opening just on the borders of Hounslow and Ealing. Is it in South Ealing Road? I'm going to put it in one of my updates. It's in my inbox, and I think it's a cafe for youngsters with mental health issues. Is that right, Kate?
Yeah, it's repurposing a kind of ex-retail space, which is great, into a health and wellbeing cafe. So it's going to bring services together that support young people, children and young people, and kind of early families as well. And also will then be a legitimate space that they can kind of be and hang out. Obviously, we're aware of, you know, over years, the youth service kind of traditional youth service offer has changed, and this is a new way of looking at how we provide youth services. So yeah, really exciting. I think in the bigger picture, I mean, obviously sports and wellbeing, the wellbeing industry has just blossomed and continues to blossom over the kind of last few years, or and I don't see that slowing. As a council, we've obviously invested in things like the Gunnersbury Sports Hub and kind of other new features, and we have a program of kind of asset renewal or what have you. And I think there was a question about the swimming pools in the chat, and obviously we continue to look at best value and ensuring that our assets are delivering best value and are fit for purpose, and that will continue. But I personally am not aware of any immediate plans to close any of the swimming pools, so I think we're okay there at the moment. But that programme obviously continues because its assets are a movable feast at the end of the day, and swimming pools and all our assets take a lot of maintenance. But I also think we've got the Women's Euros Legacy programme, which continues as well, and kind of investing in that grassroots sport. And we work very closely with Brentford Community Sports Trust about how we deliver that across all the borough and through our estates and etc. on that sport side, about getting boys and girls kind of engaged in healthy lifestyles in the round, not just kind of football, but very much in the round from a young age, and how we spread that across the borough. I also think there's lots of opportunity at the moment in terms of the town centre work we're doing. We do have vacant units across the town centre, and obviously the leader, Councillor Rajawat, was talking about the meanwhile space we're doing at the loft, but in the loft, as well as the kind of main trader space, there's back offices. We've already got, I think, 2 kind of well-being businesses, micro businesses moving in there, kind of that will start in a new space. And there's opportunities about that, how we unlock that meanwhile space and how we give people the opportunity to set up in our high streets and set those businesses up and kind of grow. And we're really happy to continue those conversations with people if that's the kind of thing. It's a very wide question, obviously, in terms of what those opportunities are, but really happy to chat through anything if that's useful at a later date.
Thank you. And the other question I think you've addressed was are our leisure centre pools at risk? But you've said no, so that's
well.
No,
I don't know if Councillor.
Yeah, more broadly, they are facing the same sort of challenges. It costs a lot to heat a pool, so we're working through with Lambton Leisure around what that actually means. But at the moment, everything is safe. Yeah.
Good, thank you. Here's an interesting thought from one of our attendees. Okay, there is a big budget gap. Why don't you look for different options to fill the gap, like selling some of the council lands with planning permission for development for building offices and rent them to SMEs to generate regular income instead of raising council tax when people are struggling with inflation and interest rates? What do you think?
Oh, no, that is an interesting one. So there is a bit of work. In fact, I say a bit of work. It's a major piece of work on our assets. So that's buildings, land, anything that is run by the council. So that's a rather large project in terms of review, and it's looked at everything that we've got. So we've got a sense of what there is. And where there are buildings, what condition they are in, and what needs to be done to bring them into usable, where they're perhaps not usable, where they've been closed for a little while, what needs to be done. The second part of that piece of work that we are now starting is actually in the context of a more community-based approach for the council, so bringing the council closer to the communities. Actually, what is needed in a community? So what buildings, what space, and where does the investment need to go? And that potentially could lead up to freeing up land. Now, what we do with that land, we're a little way off that sort of excess land, if you like. What will we do with that? We're a little way off sort of coming to a conclusion on that. But it's something that we should take into consideration. I'm not sure that we would sell it with the benefit of planning permission, but certainly local plan reviews going forward will look at some of that excess land and look at what the best use of that, and it will give you an indication of what would be acceptable or not in planning terms should you wish to invest in a parcel of land that is excess to our need. But we are a few years off that. I have to be very, very honest on that. So I think Shankar and I are probably on a similar page, but my horizon is slightly longer term, but that is work that's sort of going on.
Thank you. I've got a quick question because that reminded me. Do we know what's happening with GSK House? I mean, I know the GSK, they're moving, but do we have any plans? I mean, it's a huge building.
Kate, have you? I'll be honest, I've not heard anything recently. Kate, any news?
I don't think there's anything we can kind of say publicly. I think discussions are all underway behind the scenes, so it's available. been in the market for being leased if anyone wants an enormous new office, but it's also on the market for sale. So yeah, I think those processes are running concurrently. So it will be, we will see hopefully attract a new positive use for that site, which is obviously a flagship site for the borough. But as we said, we've got all sorts of interest in our growth sectors in the Great West Corridor, and that continues. So yeah, so hopefully we'll find a really positive use. But we're all working behind the scenes, from Niall and the leader and our executive director on that. So
super, thank you. And then that brings me on to the Treaty Centre. Can you share any ideas about what's going on there?
Kate, bring you back in. You're closer to it than I have been.
So from our side, I think it's big. It's part of a much bigger picture. So we are, as the leader said, undertaking the town centre master plans at the moment, which will be coming to cabinet in April. And the Treaty Centre plays a huge role in Hounslow Town Centre in terms of provision of retail space, and home to a number of our loved shops and kind of provisions there. So what happens with the future of that is really crucial to us and really important to us, and we're working very, very closely with the new owners, BYM Capital, and their development partners, who have been, I think it's been in the London news, about how they bring forward a scheme for that site, which is meets our ambitions. As Councillor Rajawat said, we are very ambitious for Hounslow. Hounslow Town Centre is thriving. It's a bustling place. It's got really high footfall. We do not want to in any way diminish any of that. So we are really committed. I have a really strong team internally across the council working to ensure that the redevelopment happens in a very positive and a way that will future-proof the viability of the town centre. So as with all things planning, these things trundle along, and there will be, I think that we are talking to them about an engagement plan. So I think they will start their kind of more public engagement probably towards the end of March, something like that, about kind of coming out with their initial, what their ideas are for the scheme. And they will be taken in due course to planning committee and considered by the council of whether we consider that acceptable. But obviously we've got a lot of interest in there in terms of the theatre space and the kind of arts and cultural space there and various other community spaces. So we're very committed to ensuring we get a good deal for Hounslow Town Centre as that moves forward. And
the new loft space, which we're all really excited about.
Yeah, well, the kind of long-term ambition for the loft space is that obviously we're prepping these micros and we're kind of getting them ready and doing all the capacity building and kind of getting them ready, and then they will be ready to take on their own units or share units and kind of move on to that next stage in the reprovision of the Treaty Centre. So that's the kind of the long-term ambition. It is meanwhile space. It's always intended to be that. So it will be that decant then into other units in Hounslow or across the rest of the borough.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
So I've seen Matthew Merrick has got a good question in from the Holiday Inn in Brentford, who asks that there's a big focus on cycle lanes throughout Hounslow and nearby boroughs, but we don't have any bike stations yet from people like Santander or Lime Bikes. Is there something that we can do? They come right up to the edge of our borough and perhaps a little bit into Chiswick, but how do we get them to move that next stage on into Brentford and Greater Hounslow? Because ideally outside places like the Holiday Inn and Syon Park, I think it would give tourists a big chance of getting into those areas just on the edge of our suburban area.
Yeah, Matthew's absolutely right to ask the question, especially because we champion active travel in the borough. So yeah, it's a key agenda. We have previously investigated the Santander bikes coming out this far, and there wasn't an appetite at that point for logistical reasons, because it's very much contained within central London. That having been said, there are lots of alternative options that are available and on the market at the moment. Councillor Catherine Dunn, the deputy leader of the council, alongside Councillor Salman Shaheen, are both looking at various different options. So, sort of geofenced bikes are in the mix, and it's about balancing having those active travel opportunities with that sort of the level of complaints you'll get from people just leaving bikes anywhere. You know, if there's one thing that really annoys people, it's a line bike that's left where it shouldn't be, or in the middle of the road, or in the middle of a pavement, and then not collected. So there is work going on in the background. It is a little bit of a watch this space, but we are very keen to try and promote active travel, as well as offering options for tourists that are coming into the borough as well. Again, we're probably, I would say, about 3 or 4 months probably off sort of having a discussion at Cabinet around options. We're still sort of looking through various different things at this point, but it is something that we are looking at.
Dare I say, you might find that the Holiday Inn would prefer lime-coloured bikes because they're in their corporate colours.
Well, absolutely, absolutely.
Over to you, Sally.
Well, I think that's all the questions we have. We've got 8 minutes to go, so I could let you all out early. So yeah, I'm thinking we'll wrap up there. Thank you so much indeed, Shantanu, for being with us today, and all your team. Thank you, Alan. Good questions as ever. Thank you. And yeah, it's all been recorded. A lot of the information I sent out in my updates to our database of 8,500. So please do read those updates. All right. I think that wraps it up. Thank you very much indeed, one and all. Thank you.
I think there's one last thing to say as well, and that is that the Chamber's got a really good relationship with the council. We have regular meetings. If people do have follow-up questions that they want raised and discussed, please let us know. We're a very good conduit to have a good, friendly, honest question and get a good answer back for you.
Well put. Thank you very much, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.